Have a sweet nightmares. I'm an ER nurse at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan, New York. It's the oldest public hospital in the United States, a sprawling medley of worn-out bricks and glass that's seen too many years. The atmosphere is thick with a blend of disinfectants, anxiety, and old coffee, a cocktail only familiar to those who've spent endless hours in hospital corridors. The ER is a cacophony of beeping monitors and murmuring voices, punctuated by occasional screams or sobs. The pale fluorescent lights provide a constant sterile glow, painting everything in an eerie, ghostly pallor. The night shifts are the worst. It's when the hospital's age really shows, creaks and groans echoing through the hallways. Sometimes it's easy to believe the urban legends, stories of past patients who never left, their spirits lingering long after their bodies gave up. One night I was tending to an elderly woman, Mrs. Green, a regular due to her failing heart. As I was updating her chart, she grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with fear. "He's here," she whispered, pointing to a shadowy corner of the room. There was nothing there, but Mrs. Green was insistent, her grip tightening as she whispered about a man, faceless and dark, standing in the corner watching. I tried to calm her, attributing her fear to medication and her failing health, but she was adamant. A week later, Mrs. Green passed away. It was a quiet, peaceful death, but her last words to me were chilling. "Don't let him see you. Don't let him catch you." Her words haunted me. I began seeing shadows where there were none, hearing whispers in the silence. I convinced myself it was just stress and fatigue playing tricks on my mind. Until one night I saw him. I was alone in the medication room, the silence punctuated by the soft hum of the refrigerator. As I reached for a vial, I felt a cold breath on my neck. I turned around and there he was. A tall, shadowy figure just like Mrs. Green had described. No face, just darkness. I blinked and he was gone. I chalked it up to my overactive imagination, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The following nights were a nightmare. I saw the shadowy figure everywhere, standing in the corner, lurking in the hallways, disappearing each time I tried to get a closer look. The fear was suffocating, but I couldn't leave. I had patients who relied on me. I decided to confront it, to face my fear. One night, I purposely stayed back in the medication room waiting for the shadowy figure. And just as expected, he appeared. I spoke, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" There was no answer, just an oppressive sense of dread, but I stood my ground. "I'm not afraid of you," I lied. And then he disappeared, as suddenly as he had appeared. The room seemed lighter, the air easier to breathe. I haven't seen him since that night. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me, or if I really encountered something otherworldly. All I know is Bellevue isn't just a hospital. It's a place carrying years of pain, death, and yes, maybe even spirits. The unseen shadows of Bellevue have stories to tell, stories that could make your blood run cold. I've learned to coexist with them. After all, we're all here in the service of life, and that's my horrific, true hospital horror story. A tale of unseen shadows and fears that lurk in the corners of our minds. My name is Thomas. I've been working at St. James Hospital right smack in the heart of Chicago for about 25 years now. I started as an orderly, but I was promoted to a nurse after a couple of years, long enough to see some pretty weird stuff. But what happened in the winter of '96? Well, that just takes the cake. St. James wasn't too fancy, just a typical city hospital. Its white, sterile walls always felt like they were closing in on you, and the incessant beeping of monitors added a permanent hum to the background. The fluorescent lights beating down gave everything a sickly green hue, and the smell, a cocktail of disinfectant, sickness, and death, was something you never really got used to. It was a cold Tuesday night, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes everything just a bit harder. The snow was falling in heavy, wet clumps onto the city, turning the usually bustling streets into a hushed winter wonderland. I was assigned to the ICU that night. The unit was eerily quiet, save for the occasional cough or the low murmurs of the overnight staff. I was in the middle of my rounds, making sure everyone was resting comfortably, when an announcement came over the PA system. Code Blue, ER. A car crash victim, they said. Guy named Eddie. Construction worker, mid-30s. His truck had skidded on the icy road, crashing into a lamppost. He was in bad shape, unconscious with head injuries and broken ribs. He was immediately wheeled into ICU. I remember the first time I looked at him. He was a big guy, broad-shouldered and muscular, but as he lay there hooked up to tubes and machines, he looked so small, so vulnerable. His eyes were closed and a thick bandage was wrapped around his head, a dark red spot seeping through. Over the next few days, his condition didn't improve. He remained unconscious. We were all on edge, each passing day adding an extra layer of anxiety. One night, as I was checking Eddie's vitals, I noticed something strange on the monitor. His heart rate was steady, but the brain activity was erratic. As I watched, it began to spike dramatically. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. I felt a chill run through me, but I brushed it off as a draft. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl. I froze, my blood turning cold. It was coming from Eddie. His eyes shot open, revealing nothing but white. His body started convulsing violently, the bed rattling with force. I hit the alarm, and within seconds the room was filled with doctors and nurses. They tried to stabilize him, but nothing was working. His heart rate was through the roof, and the convulsions weren't stopping. Suddenly, as quickly as it began, it stopped. Eddie's body went limp. His heart rate slowed down until it was back to normal. But his eyes, they were still open, still white. No one knew what happened. There were whispers of a seizure, but it didn't add up. Eddie stayed in that state, unresponsive but alive, for a week until his family decided to pull the plug. His heart stopped on a cold Thursday morning, and just like that, he was gone. The staff was shaken, but life had to go on. The hospital didn't stop for one man, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few nights after Eddie's death, I was doing my rounds in the ICU. The lights flickered again, and a chill ran through me. I heard the growl once more, echoing through the empty hallways. I turned around, half expecting to see Eddie lying there. But there was nothing, only the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. I don't know what happened that night, and I don't think I want to. All I know is that after 25 years in medicine, it takes a lot to scare me. But that was pure, unadulterated horror. It's been years, but I still can't forget Eddie's white eyes staring at me, and sometimes, when the lights flicker, I can still hear that growl. The city of Chicago, Illinois, with its towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, is always teeming with life. But tucked away from the city's lively downtown area, past the well-trodden streets of the Magnificent Mile and the charmingly romantic Navy Pier, is the foreboding presence of Cook County Hospital. This institution, a monolith of weathered brick and steel, sits like a mostly forgotten relic of times past. It's not as shiny and new as the other medical centers in the city, but it has a history that I know all too well. I'm John, a hospital janitor, and I've seen things in this place, unsettling things that would make your skin crawl. My shift starts as dusk begins to settle, casting long shadows that dance upon the cracked linoleum floors. The hospital halls, once bustling with the frantic energy of doctors and nurses, grow eerily quiet. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the faint, lingering aroma of cafeteria food fill the air. The fluorescent lights overhead flicker sporadically, casting an unsettling pallor over everything. My first task is usually to clean the old children's ward. It was shut down years ago due to lack of funding, but remained eerily untouched, like a time capsule. As I push my cleaning cart down the hallway, I can't shake off the feeling of being watched. I often hear soft whispers, echoing through the empty wards. It's just the old pipes, I tell myself. It has to be. One evening, as I was scrubbing the old operating room, I saw something that made my heart freeze. A reflection in the polished metal surface of the surgical table. A specter of a man in an old-fashioned doctor's coat, holding a gleaming scalpel. I spun around, but there was nothing behind me. The room was as empty as it had been seconds before. I tried to shrug it off, but the image haunted me. The following night, as I was cleaning the same room, I found a scalpel lying on the floor. It was old and rusted, like it had been there for years, but it was exactly like the one I had seen in the reflection. Things only got worse from there. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker. I heard footsteps echoing behind me, even when I was alone. I saw figures darting in the corners of my vision, and then one night, I saw her. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7, standing at the end of the hallway in the children's ward. She was wearing a tattered hospital gown, and her eyes were hollow and sad. She asked me if I could help her find her mommy. I felt a cold chill running through me, and when I blinked, she was gone. The encounters became more frequent, more terrifying. I saw patients who weren't there, heard screams that made my blood run cold. The once familiar hospital hallways began to feel like a labyrinth of horrors. One night I found myself standing in front of the old morgue. I don't remember walking there. The heavy metal door creaked open on its own, revealing a pitch-black room. An icy wind rushed past me, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of death and decay. The last thing I remember was a hand, cold and clammy, gripping my shoulder. I turned around and there he was, the doctor with the scalpel. His eyes bore into mine, filled with an unnatural, chilling gleam. I don't remember how I got home that night. I woke up in my bed, soaked in sweat and heart pounding. I never returned to that hospital. But even now, miles away from the haunting presence of Cook County Hospital, I can still hear the whispers, see the figures. They say that the hospital is haunted. I don't know about that. All I know is what I saw, what I felt. And let me tell you, there's nothing more terrifying than the reality of your own fear. My name's David, and I won't forget that night in Mercy General, a hospital nestled in the bustling heart of Detroit. That ancient building, a monolith of red brick and grimy windows, had seen better days. It was a place where the paint peeled like sunburnt skin, and the linoleum floors were worn down by countless shuffling feet. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long shadows that danced on the sterile white walls. I had been admitted for a minor surgery, nothing serious. The first few days were uneventful. I was housed in a shared room with an elderly man named Harold. He was a chatterbox, full of stories from his youth. He'd been in and out of hospitals for years, he said, but Mercy General gave him the creeps. I laughed it off at the time. One night I woke up to Harold's whispered prayers. I groggily asked him what was wrong. His eyes were wide with terror as he pointed to the corner of the room. "The shadow, David," he hissed. "It's here for me." And I remember laughing it off, chalking it up to the ramblings of an old man. But his fear was infectious, and I found myself staring at the harmless dark corner, my heart pounding in my chest. Over the following days, Harold's health took a turn for the worse. He was moved to the intensive care unit. That night, the room felt colder, emptier. I lay in my bed, staring at Harold's empty one, the silence deafening. Then I heard it, a soft, almost inaudible whisper, like silk dragging across the floor. I sat up, squinting into the darkness. There it was, a shadowy figure standing by Harold's bed, its form less substantial than the darkness around it. I felt my blood turn to ice. It turned towards me and I saw its eyes, hollow, bottomless pits. I was too paralyzed to scream. Then it was gone, vanished. I spent the rest of the night awake, every creak of the building sending shivers down my spine. The next morning, a nurse came to inform me that Harold had passed away. I was shocked, but part of me wasn't surprised. That night, the whispers returned. This time, they seemed louder, closer. I sat up, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. The shadow was there, at the foot of my bed this time. Its hollow eyes bore into mine, and I felt a cold dread seep into me. It was here for me now. I screamed, finally finding my voice. Nurses and doctors rushed in, their faces blurring as I was sedated. I woke up in a different room, the sun streaming through the window. A doctor told me it was all a hallucination caused by my medication. But as he left the room, I saw it, a shadowy figure lurking in the corner. I knew then it wasn't over. In the end, I checked myself out of that godforsaken place. I never stepped foot in Mercy General again, but even now on the darkest nights I still hear the whispers, and I can't shake off the feeling of being watched by hollow eyes. As I lay on the back seat of the cab, I could feel the chill of the icy leather against my clammy skin. The flickering streetlights of Chicago's West Side were painting an eerie scene as we drove towards Rush University Medical Center. I remember the scent of my own fear mingling with the old cab's odor of damp upholstery and stale cigarette smoke. The hospital loomed like a monolith against the night sky, its stark white exterior appearing spectral in the moonlight. The lobby of the hospital was a stark contrast to the cold, menacing exterior, warm albeit sterile, and with the sound of soft voices and the occasional trill of the phone. I was wheeled into a private room on the 3rd floor. The room felt strangely devoid of life, the only sounds being the rhythmic hum of the machines and the occasional murmur of voices from the corridor. The off-white walls, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the single window overlooking the city skyline etched an image in my mind that haunts me to this day. The first couple of days were uneventful, but then the night shifts started. I would often see a nurse, Susan, who had a comforting presence, with her round spectacles and soft voice. But there was something about her that made the hairs on the nape of my neck stand on end. One night, as I lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling, I felt an icy hand on my forehead. It was Susan, checking my temperature. The room was bathed in an eerie glow from the moonlight filtering through the window. The silence was deafening, the only sound being the erratic beep of the heart monitor. From that night onwards, things started going awry. I would wake up to find my bedsheets torn, my IV drip displaced, or strange symbols etched onto the window pane. I could hear whispers in the dead of the night, chilling laughter that seemed to echo through the empty corridors. One day when I confronted Susan about these occurrences, her face paled. She mumbled something about the room being cursed, and hurriedly left, leaving me in a state of panic. The climax of these events was the night I saw her. A ghostly figure, a woman, standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with hollow eyes. I could see the outline of her white robe and her pale face in the dim moonlight. She pointed at me and opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. I woke up the next morning drenched in sweat. Susan was standing by my bed, her face pale and her eyes white with fear. She told me that I had been screaming in my sleep and that the room was freezing cold. After that night, I demanded to be moved to a different room. The hospital obliged, and I was moved to a warmer, brighter room on the 5th floor. The strange occurrences ceased, and I was finally able to sleep peacefully. Despite the physical healing, the psychological scars remained. I left the hospital a changed man, forever haunted by the events that transpired in that room. I often wonder if it was all a figment of my imagination, or if there was something sinister lurking in the corners of that room. One thing is for sure, I will never step foot in Rush University Medical Center again. This tale may sound far-fetched, and I wouldn't blame you for not believing it, but every word is true. I've told my story, not as a warning, but as a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are not those that lurk in the shadows, but those that reside within us. Alright guys, we've reached the end of our chilling journey through these 5 hospital horror stories. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss out on any future spine-chilling tales. If you're still craving more of these eerie stories, there's plenty more waiting for you right here on this channel. And if you have your own unsettling hospital tales to share, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments section below. We're always eager to hear your spine-tingling experiences. Before you go, remember to hit that bell icon to receive notifications every time we upload a new video. That way you'll never miss a chance to get your fair share of frights. And now, I'll leave you to the silence of the night. May your dreams be filled with the echoes of these stories, and may your night be as sleepless as a haunted hospital hallway. Until next time, sweet nightmares, my friends.